You know, when you look at human history, the sheer scale of conflict, it can be just overwhelming. So how do we even begin to make sense of it all? Today, we're diving into a really fascinating framework from a place you might not expect, the Book of Genesis. It actually proposes a plan not just for understanding evil, but for restoring goodness. Okay, so let's just start with a number, a huge one, 86 million. So what is that? Well, according to historian Jonathan Glover, that's the estimated number of people killed in wars in just the first 90 years of the 20th century alone. And as staggering as that number is, believe it or not, it's not the whole story. The framework we're exploring today points to an even bigger number, 120 million. That's the estimated death toll from government-sponsored mass murder during that exact same time period. To really wrap your head around that first number, the 86 million war deaths, the source offers this pretty chilling calculation. It's like 2,500 people dying every single day, or 100 people every hour for 90 straight years. I mean, that's a pace of destruction that's almost impossible to imagine. So it's really no wonder that historians now call the 20th century the cruelest century. It was this strange paradox, right? A time of incredible technological progress, but also of cruelty on a scale never seen before. And that brings us to the real heart of this explainer. I mean, when you're faced with that kind of history and the evil we still see all around us, how do you even begin to make sense of it? Well, the framework we're looking at today suggests an answer from a pretty unexpected place. It argues that the ancient book of Genesis actually lays out a kind of divine plan, not just to understand evil, but to finally deal with it and bring back goodness. All right, so here's our roadmap. We've just touched on the cruelest century. Now we're going to unpack this plan from Genesis, then zoom in on what it calls the era of grace, see how that's meant to demonstrate the garden, compare a code book versus grace, and finally, land on the big takeaway, the two halves of goodness. So first up, let's get into this plan from Genesis and unpack what the source calls the three threes framework. The whole idea is structured around three sets of three that are all connected. We've got times, eras, and families. And each set links up with the others to tell one big overarching story. And here's how it all clicks together. You have three families, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Each one of them represents a specific era, law, grace, and judgment. And then each of those eras lines up with a time, past, present, and future. So you can see Abraham connects to the past and the era of law. Jacob points to the future and judgment. And Isaac, he's right there in the middle, representing our present in what's called the era of grace. Okay, so let's focus in on that middle column, Isaac and the era of grace. This is described as the time we are living in right now, sandwiched right between law and judgment. And this is really the central claim for us today. According to this whole interpretation, we're not in a time of just defining the rules, and we're not yet in the time of final consequences. Right now, we are living in the time of Isaac, which it defines as the era of grace. So who was this guy, Isaac? Well, his story has some big dramatic moments, for sure. You've got the miraculous birth, and of course that famous, terrifying test of faith on the mountain. But outside of those moments, his life is described as surprisingly, well, normal. He dealt with tricky family dynamics, arguments with neighbors, the realities of getting older. It's a very human story. And this all leads to a really powerful quote that kind of reframes his entire life. This is Isaac, to know the grace of family, work, and community. So the idea here is that grace isn't some lofty, abstract concept. It's something you actually find and express in the day-to-day stuff of life. But what's the actual point of this era of grace? What's it for? Well, that brings us right to our next section, demonstrating the garden. So, if the eras of law and judgment are about restraining and ultimately getting rid of evil, then what's the role of grace? Well, according to this framework, it has a completely different job. Its purpose isn't to fight evil head-on, but to do something else entirely.
And that job? It's to actively demonstrate goodness. The source lays it out in this really beautiful, almost poetic way. It says, the role of grace is to reveal to the darkness what light is, to show cruelty what kindness is, to show arrogance what humility is, to show greed what contentment is, to show lust what love is, and to show the cursed what blessing is. See, it's not passive at all. It's an active demonstration of a better way to be.
Now, that's a pretty abstract idea, right? So to make it more concrete, the source gives us this fantastic modern analogy. Let's take a look at the code book versus grace. Okay, I want you to picture this. Imagine you have a neighbor and their house is just a complete disaster. It's unhealthy, it's unsafe, it's totally falling apart. So, how do you deal with that? You basically have two approaches. On one side, you've got the law. That's like pulling out the city's code book of health and safety violations. It defines the problem, brings judgment, and yeah, it might even get the person evicted. It stops the bad situation, sure, but it doesn't offer a positive way forward. But then on the other side, you have grace. This is like inviting that neighbor into your own warm, safe, clean home. It doesn't condemn them, it shows them what a healthy home feels like, and that can spark a desire for something better. The difference is captured in this one simple, incredibly powerful line. The code book will show him the street. Grace will show him the garden. And that brings us right to the final takeaway. Really, the central thesis of this entire framework, the two halves of goodness. The crucial point here is that overcoming evil isn't a one-step thing. It's a two-part plan. First, you have to negate its power. That's the job of law and judgment. But that is only half the battle. The second and just as vital part is to demonstrate the alternative, to actively show the goodness of the garden through this era of grace. One part stops the bad and the other inspires the good. So what this makes clear is that grace isn't just about passively forgiving things. It's an active, compelling demonstration of a better way. And so the real question this leaves us with is, in a world that's still wrestling with the legacy of that cruelest century, what does an active demonstration of goodness, of the garden, what does that actually look like for us today?